Hey, it's Patrick here, and in this episode of Philosophy Sundays, I'd like to talk about a question that I've been asked fairly often the past couple of years. This question is: how did I get started with philosophy? And for someone that would like to learn philosophy or is interested in learning philosophy, how would they go on about getting started? So, my personal story with philosophy is that in grade 11, I was introduced to the philosophical movement, which is existentialism. Existentialism is essentially focuses on questions regarding individuals' own existence. Um, this really fascinated me as this philosophy or this philosophical movement actually focuses more on each individual's experience and that humans don't necessarily have an essence that they're born with. The famous line by Jean-Paul Sartre is that existence precedes essence. Took me quite a few years to really grasp what this means, but essentially, I believe it means that we are thrown into the world as we are born. No one really asks to be born. And it's through our decisions and what we do and what happens to us that end up defining our lives. With existentialism, to be more specific, Jean Paul Sartre's existentialism, each human being doesn't have uh, an essence that is set from birth. Each human being doesn't have, let's say, their own nature. They're responsible for all their actions, thus making them responsible for who they become. I thought I was really fascinated by this in high school, since at that age, a lot of people are telling you what to do. But running into existentialism, it really brought in the idea that I really have to figure myself out and who I am and what I want to become. No one is going to do that for me, and no one is responsible for my own actions other than myself. And no one's going to suffer the consequences if I guess, screw up my own life. But on the bright side, no one else is going to reap the rewards if I live a great life. So yeah, that was my introduction to philosophy. For someone wanting to get started, but they don't know where to start, or just even someone who's interested in philosophy, one of the biggest things, and I think is still the most important, is to really just read philosophy. Um, yeah, that's about it. I mean, you really got to catch up on all the philosophy that started during ancient Greece and up until modern, and there's even postmodern philosophy nowadays. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of reading. I remember when I was in Quebec City the first time. I studied there for a semester, and I had access to a huge library in French. Uh, by the way, I only read philosophy in French, really. I've only read philosophy in English maybe two books, one being Of Ontology by Jeremy Bentham. I only read this in English because, well, he's an English philosopher, but it was interesting because the book, it's divided so that one side is in the original English and the other side is the French translation. Um, yeah, it's just going to be a lot of reading. Also, with the reading in philosophy, a lot of it is going to be very difficult to understand at first. Um, Maybe from 2011 until 2000, I'd say maybe even 14, I was almost unable to understand any of the philosophy reading that I was doing. That's what it seemed like anyway. The interesting about studying philosophy is that you don't have to understand all the little details. In fact, I kind of think that's the point in reading philosophy. You really get exposed to that feeling that there's very little that you know about the world. Um, but it's cool because, unlike uh, my studies in science, where if I were to do reading and studying and not understand most of it, the moment I would have to take a test or an exam in science, I would essentially be screwed because I don't understand the concepts and I don't have a good grasp of all the little details that I will be examined on. But with philosophy, even if I did reading and the studying and I didn't really understand everything, and I even felt like I understood little at all, uh, when I came to the tests, since philosophy really looks at the importance of the question rather than the answer, I was still able to do really well. So I think that's interesting. And yeah, I guess it's really important to get to reading. What should someone just starting in philosophy read at first? I guess it really depends with each person. I mean, you really want to start reading philosophy that you're sort of interested in. Uh, if there's a philosophical author or philosopher that you already are familiar with, then go ahead, start with that. Um, of course, I was introduced to philosophy through existentialism, so a lot of my first readings was solely focused on existentialism. I read a lot of Sartre, a lot of Camus, Descartes was really interesting. Carl Jaspers was a good existentialist to read as well. Now, I tend to read a little more of a variety nowadays. There's a lot of different branches in philosophy, by the way. There is ethics, there is aesthetics, there is philosophy of the mind. There is also there's logic as well. With all of these, the definitions for these terms didn't really come to me till later on in my career in philosophy. I remember taking a first class in ethics in my first year of university. It was Ethics of War and Peace, and the definition for ethics didn't really click in my mind until my last year in university, which was 2 years ago. But yeah, ethics, essentially it's all questions, philosophical questions regarding how we cut between what is good and what is bad. While studying this, it was also revealed to me that aesthetics was a similar question, but fundamentally different. So with aesthetics, it's all philosophical questions regarding how we cut between what looks good versus what does not, or what looks bad. It's all questions on what is beauty or beautiful and what is ugly. With logic, I believe we studied mostly Aristotle's logic, which is essentially how premises work together so that we reach certain conclusions. And it really focuses on really finding out who really knows what they're talking about through Socratic dialogue, which is through asking questions. One of the greatest things that I took from taking a logic class was that if a person cannot define a term they're using, they also would mean that they don't know what they're talking about. Again, this kind of relates to education, just because you really need to focus on who your teachers are and if they're credible enough to be teaching you these things. I guess a concrete example would be I wouldn't take family advice from someone who doesn't have a family. I wouldn't take dating advice from someone who's never been in a long-term relationship. I wouldn't take money advice from someone who's ridiculously in debt. These all seem very obvious, but there's kind of a phenomenon where if someone can speak through rhetoric very well, more people tend to believe them just because it plays on the rhetoric plays on the emotions, right? As opposed to if you really look at what they're saying and each individual premise and analyze each this using logic, you would find out if everything makes sense logically. Politicians are really good at rhetoric. I also took a rhetoric class. It's the art of speaking. And in that class, it was almost the opposite of logic, where logic is really focused on making sure what you say is fundamentally sound so that you reach conclusions that make logical sense. But with the art of speaking, it's more how we say things so that even if what we say is wrong, we are still able to convince the audience or whoever's listening of our point. So I guess going back to how someone would start and continue studying philosophy, it was really just be reading and really trying to get to know yourself. I believe it's either Plato or Socrates that says the quote, "Know thyself." By studying how you yourself work, who you are, who you want to become, what are your core values, what are your biggest dreams, what are the things that you find are important. Once you're able to answer these questions really fast, which obviously would take a little bit of time if you don't know the answers already, then things seem a lot easier. And it's almost as if you get to walk through life with ease. I think really the most important one is really knowing what your core values are, and really focused on being able to express those core values quickly and without hesitation. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to figure yourself out within a day or even a weekend of just really meditating on who you are. But again, it's a lifelong endeavor, right? I mean, every moment I believe that each individual is changing. And yeah, you really gotta, you have your whole life to figure yourself out. The quicker you do it, the more grounded you'll be. And again, the more easier things will be, and you would just walk through life with a sort of sense of ease. I guess my example of this was maybe when I first started university and even a little bit of in high school, where you're still kind of figuring yourself out. I couldn't tell you what my core values were back then. Now I can easily say that my core values are freedom, health, wealth, family, relationships, and passions. I think passions being the first most important. And I really try to align all those to kind of shoot for my dreams. Again, it wasn't easy for me to figure out what those core values were. But once I did, it took mostly my whole university career and even moving out for a year and living out in Quebec, where no one else had my back when I first got there. I think that really pushed me to figure myself out. No one's gonna figure yourself out for you, unfortunately. It's your own job, really. I believe it's really important, just because once we figure ourselves out, once we know what we're passionate about, and we find work through that, then working becomes awesome, right? If you love what you do, it's not such a big deal to put in those 8, 10, 12, maybe even 18 hours of work a day. You just gotta figure out what makes you happy, right? I think it might even be universal that every human being wants to be happy. This is kind of contradictory to what I said earlier, as in there's no such thing as human nature when it comes to existentialism. But again, existentialism was just the beginning of my philosophical thought. I wouldn't say that it is everything that my thought stems from. Yeah, so I guess that's what I could say about how I got started and how someone else could get started in philosophy. Really, it's just a lot of reading, reading philosophy, obviously. Really trying to sit down and figure yourself out. I remember my philosophy prof said something interesting, that if you're not able to, how do I word this out? What did he say? He said I think it was somewhere along the lines of the question, can you stand having dinner with just yourself? I think what he was really trying to point to here is, are you comfortable enough to just be alone and enjoy your own company? Not need external stimulus or other people to make you feel good, but to feel good just because you exist. Yeah. I guess one last thing I'll have to add in this video is that for these Philosophy Sunday videos, since for some of you that know I'm studying in education, it's a 2-year program for me to become a teacher. But yeah, I had a good talk with one of my in one of my classes actually, and it was all on the topic of social media and education and being teachers. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you look at it, there are certain themes, topics, ideas, philosophical subjects, I guess, and even philosophers that I probably shouldn't talk about if I want to protect my future career as a teacher. Anything touchy, really, I can't really speak of. Any radical philosophies, I can't really, again, talk about. Which, again, I think I'm kind of okay with now. I mean, there's still a lot of philosophy out there that doesn't touch on touchy subjects, that isn't very radical. But yeah, so in these philosophy blogs, I won't be able to speak about everything, just because by putting these videos in public, anything I say can be and will be used against me if I say something that could hurt my career as a teacher. That being said, I guess if there are certain philosophical ideas that are still interesting, but maybe a little bit touchy, I'll save that for after retirement. I mean, this gives me a bunch of content that hopefully you viewers will look forward to once I retire. Yeah, I can't really, a lot of Nietzsche I probably can't talk about, which sucks because he's really cool. Very interesting philosophy there. But yeah, I guess most of Nietzsche will be touched upon after I retire as a teacher. But yeah, I look forward to being a teacher for most of my life, but also look forward to being a philosopher till the day I die. So have a happy Sunday, and thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.